Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. We have plenty of things to discuss, some trades, some bad losses by a particular team that drew the attention of Eklund in his blog today, some trade rumors, and the clock ticks towards the deadline at 3 p.m. on the 24th. But Russ starts us off with some pre-show stuff.
I don't know if there are any good losses. I'll say that first. But here is the pre-show. So in the 1970s, there were a couple puppet makers, and it's a shame X not here because he would like to hear this, that created the Philly Phanatic. And when they created the Philly Phanatic, they came into a deal with the Philadelphia Phillies to make a costume, get the Phanatic going, and the Phanatic's been an institution ever since. Well, as it turns out, the contract that was signed like the rights were in perpetuity. In perpetuity,
yes.
In perpetuity, thank you. And now it turns out that those rights, after 35 years, can be challenged by the creators. So there is a lawsuit with two puppeteers and the Philadelphia Phillies, and now Major League Baseball has been brought in. They have been subpoenaed into this lawsuit over the Philly Phanatic. Now, we've seen the San Diego Chicken did sue as well and gained his freedom and became just the Chicken. Like that was the first time we'd ever heard this. But the Phanatic is bigger at this point. The interesting thing about this one is it's about merchandise sales. The Phillies are so worried about losing the merchandise sales for the Phanatic because they sell plush dolls, shirts, all these different things. It almost seems like the mascot showing up is secondary, and so they're really trying to make sure they still have the rights to sell the merchandise. So there's something like 19 depositions, and in June, that is when the copyright runs out, and this court case will be finished, or at least be finished before then. But Kevin, this has become a big case over whether the Philly Phanatic will ever be in Philadelphia ever again after June.
Well, this is like mutual destruction, though. Like, yeah. Really, it is. Like the Phanatic is nothing without the Phillies, and they need the Phanatic. Obviously, the Phillies do because it's a great character. It's probably the most well known of the mascots, don't you think?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. So, they just need to get in a room and hash it out. Is all.
It sounds like that. Dave Raymond, the original Phanatic, has been brought into this. There's former employee.
I would pay, though, $23.19 to see the Philly Phanatic walked into a courtroom, park himself, and have to testify.
It would be bad. It would be great.
That would be awesome.
What's going to happen, Russ, is that the Philly Phanatic will be assassinated, and the assassin will be Gritty. But it's
possible.
Man, did that turn dark all of a sudden?
That did turn dark.
Yeah.
We're assassinating the Philly Phanatic now.
But do you think that's interesting here is that based on this, in perpetuity is now 35 years.
Right.
Because it's like
it's not a guarantee. It only means you could challenge it, and then it's up to a judge to overturn it or not.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not going to. Well, do we take this as seriously as the assault charges on Gritty that got dismissed a couple weeks ago, or is this more serious?
No, this is more serious because this is for a lot of money, where the other lawsuits seem very frivolous. End of the day, I do have a picture of the Philly Phanatic in my books, Baseball's Best Rookies, which does get re-released March 24th. So I have to mention that with Mike Piazza. He photobombed Mike Piazza. So we all love the Phanatic. We do.
Yeah, they being the Phillies would take a bad hit if they just had walked away from it.
Right.
But if they wouldn't let the Phanatic, wear Phillies gear, what good is it?
Well, what we're going to hear is that there's going to be a deadline deal. The Philly Phanatic will be traded to Montreal for Yuppie.
Yuppie has changed uniforms before, so it's not unheard of.
Yeah, I don't know. The whole thing sounds like both parties need each other in order to make the most out of the
right.
And they might settle. All right, let's get rolling.
Okay. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, February 19th, 2020.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm still a free agent.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, some broad brush here with some of the moves that were made yesterday. We'll mention them specifically in the course of conversation. But Kev, yesterday when we had Eck on the show, and we were talking about the market rate sort of going up, we looked at the deals that were made for Blake Coleman. There was a first-round pick and Nolan Foote, and other deal, the second-round pick and David Quenneville for an aging but still effective Andy Green. That I thought, and I think to a lesser extent, Russ thought that the market rate was going up. That those were indicators that the prices were going to be more significant than I think that some buyers thought it was going to be. And if you look, I think that yes, Hayek. If you look at what happened yesterday, a second-round pick and a conditional pick for Marco Scandella, a second and another pick for Brendan Dillon, and the rumored deal that Bob McKenzie reported last night that may happen today of 2 second-round picks for Alec Martinez. I think it's borne out that it's definitely a seller's market, and the sellers are getting a lot more than people thought.
Well, I mean, yeah, but it's in the ballpark. Like, Blake Coleman is a 20-goal scorer.
Sure.
And you get term on the deal. So, I mean, don't you think you should give up a first rounder for him? And the same thing I would say for Tucker or for Zucker. I mean, the Penguins got about 3 years of Zucker. So I thought that was sort of in keeping to what you would normally see, whether you made that trade in the off season or wherever. I thought where the price has been a little higher has been in the, like as you said, the Scandella trade and what happened is I don't know that the price was any different than what people said it was going to be. Like we had heard 3 weeks ago that Dillon was going to go for a second rounder.
Right.
But, because Washington wanted them and, their second rounder is not very good because it's going to be lower down.
Right.
They had to give something else to get in there. So they did. And, Washington is playing with house money because they won 2 years ago. So, they can do whatever they want. And the fan base is going to say, well, you want us a cup. You must know what you're doing. And the same thing is true with the Blues. Yeah. They lose Boomeister. They identified Scandella as a guy that, he's 6'3". He's got a little bit of offense. Mm-hmm. He can play a safer role if you need him to. And they just said, well, the going rate, what is it? And it was probably a third-round pick before, but they wanted to get him, and they were willing to give more.
And Montreal retained half of his salary,
but that was a key element of that too, obviously. So
but then I'll shoot it to you, Eck and Russ. The thing that I saw, and it was talked about a lot in Buffalo, about a month ago when that Scandella deal to Montreal happened and they acquired Frolik. The Sabres got a 4th-round pick for Scandella and then flipped it for Frolik. Now we're talking a month later, and it's before the deadline, them getting a 2 and a conditional 4 if he re-signs with the Blues. I mean, Jason Botterill's got egg on his face because that looks terrible.
Well, but you could say that the fact that they took the salary was the 4, so it's really a second.
That's true.
And the Blues, you always get more at the trade deadline. I mean, everybody kind of knows that.
And the Sabres thought they were in it, so they took the player hoping they'd stay in it.
That's the key thing, and you can't fault them for that. But the biggest thing for the Sabres is, what do they do now? Like, they're 10 points out.
Yeah, they're done.
They got Frolik, they got Connor Sherry, but as soon as he puts his, holds the rummage sale, he's admitting that, I didn't get it done again this year.
Right. Yeah. Well, it was as and I know I'm not putting myself in the position of the general manager. He's got more pressures. I'm sure he's got ownership, barking at him in terms of being a contender for the playoffs. but in Buffalo, they knew this team was not a playoff team going back to December because they did the same thing that they did last year. They had a hot early start and then played terribly. And they've essentially been lying to themselves, Kev, for the last 2 months. Now, I know it's easy to say that because I don't have any stake in the game, but I, as an observer,
I'm going to stop you right at they knew in December that they weren't a playoff team. They knew no such thing in December. I mean, we've already seen last year the St. Louis Blues come from last place. I mean, they could have if they've kind of gotten their act together. And I think we've all agreed that we like the younger players on Buffalo.
Sure.
Yeah. They just didn't come through. Now, the tradition in the NHL is the general manager pays the price for that. I actually hope not, because I like Botterill and I think he knows what he's doing. I guess it's just interesting for everyone to weigh in on this.
Uh-oh.
What? That's Kevin.
He's stuck right now. So
yeah, he's stuck for a second.
If you're out of the playoffs, I'm back. Okay.
Back.
If you're out of the playoffs. Getting back in, it seems like you should have a 50-50 chance. I mean, there's, 16 teams in, 15 out. But when you think about it, there's only like 4 or 5 spots that 20 teams are competing for, because there's 10 that we know are going to get in.
That's absolutely true.
Talent level. So I guess my point is it's a little bit harder than we ever give it credit for to get a team back in the playoffs. And that's why we see teams have such lengthy time out of the playoffs. I mean, you look at Arizona and look at Edmonton, and
I mean, look at the division that Buffalo's in. Obviously everyone knows Tampa and Boston are going to make the playoffs. They're in the playoffs. There's no two ways about it, right?
Yeah.
And then you would expect Toronto to be the other team, honestly, at this point, because they've been in the playoffs. They're continuing to get better. I mean, they're still battling with Florida, at Florida begins will one of these teams get a wild card over the incredible Metro division, which is just like ridiculous. And we're going to have 6 teams with 100 points maybe in the Metro division. So it really is. I mean, not making the playoffs is not hard to do. I mean, you really have to be.
Yeah, no, that's well put. It's not hard to do. And it's harder than we ever want to get a credit for. Like, I guess is Jason Botterill a better general manager than Bill Guerin, or I guess he's not in either. I guess that's a poor example. But there are general managers probably in the playoffs that Jason Botterill might be better than. But I
think it's a combo, Kev. I think making the playoffs is a part of it, and still setting yourself up for the future is the other part. And right now, Botterill's kind of failing at both.
That's fair. I mean, I think that he has to. He may not get a chance. I mean, what do you think? Do you think he'll lose his job?
I think there's a chance.
I didn't think that there was.
I've heard there's a chance he could lose his job, but my thing is this with Botterill. I don't think his issue is. I'm going to say the bigger problem, and I really like Housley, but the bigger problem I think was that. I think Botterill's biggest mistake may have been that. I mean, Housley was a great defensive coach with the Predators. But I mean, I think Kruger is definitely the right way to go. I think they went there late. I think that Kruger, and maybe Kruger wasn't available before, but I think that they tried. They tried for Mike Babcock. They tried for things. They did things.
The thing with Botterill is at the beginning of the year, I thought there was no chance he was going to be fired unless they had a season as bad as they had last year. And this year is coming close. And I think the biggest thing with them is the Sabres are going to have over 20 million, maybe I think it's closer to 22 or 23 million in cap space next year, with 7 unrestricted free agents, with some of which you mentioned, Kev. We don't know whether they're going to trade them or not. Most of them, I don't think they are going to be back. They have a couple players like they can re-sign Dahlin to an extension. They have to re-sign Reinhart to an extension. Is that something that you want to give a sort of potential lame duck general manager in Jason Botterill the authority to do, or do you want to give that to somebody who maybe you trust more to make the decisions? That's the question, because I don't know the answer to that. It's all up to Terry Pegula and what he feels comfortable with. But I know that Sabres fans right now are incredibly frustrated that this team is going to miss the playoffs for the 9th year in a row.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
I do have a lot of Ranger. I have a lot of Ranger news whenever we want to get
go there. Go there. That sounds good.
So yesterday first they made the trade with Carolina. They got power forward Julian Gauthier for defenseman Joey Keane. What this signaled to me is, like last year, Carolina had Tony McDonald and a bunch of their scouts sort of retire, and some of them didn't retire. Tony retired and a few of them left or were fired, however you want to put it. And Rob Brind'Amour does have an iron fist now in that organization. And if you're not a real good two-way player, it seems like now that you're going to get traded. So Gauthier's one. I think Jake Bean will be the next, because while Jake Bean's a terrific offensive defenseman, he is a riverboat gambler, and there are times where he'll cough up the puck. So it does seem like now that they're getting like that. Joey Keane is a very safe defenseman, but Gauthier is a power forward with some speed who could not only score around the net, but he can score from like a one-timer from the top of the circle. He's got a lot of talent and a lot of pushback. He is actually skating with the Rangers right now with their optional skate. I mean, so do safe defensemen garner that much in the trade market, or did Carolina just get rid of a guy because Brind'Amour goes, I don't really have any use for him because he's not going to get it defensively? So that's a question there. Today in the optional skate, Kreider's not skating. He's on the side with a hoodie. So that's kind of interesting because I would think Kreider would skate otherwise.
Yeah.
So I would think that may be a sign that negotiations aren't fantastic. And if they're not fantastic, he will break the market, Kev, for what we think is a high price. I think he could get a 1, like a conditional 2, and either an A prospect or a roster player. I think that's what Chris Kreider is going to bring.
I don't doubt that. That's all possible. I mean, people were saying 2 months ago that he was going to get a first and a prospect. So, now we're just adding in a conditional based. You're talking about if they re-sign him? If
they re-sign him, if he goes to Boston, there's a good chance he'll re-sign there, right? So that's an example. Now, interesting thing, this is kind of like one of those funny things in life. I was talking to Adam Kimmelman at the Flyers game yesterday, talking about that Rick Nash deal where the Rangers got Ryan Lindgren. Lindgren, if you remember, Eck, I gave him a really glowing report saying he's very tough and will play in the NHL. He's a good defenseman. And now Brad Marchand hates him to the point where Brad Marchand said post-game like he didn't know if Lindgren would even be in this league in a couple of years, but he will because he got to Marchand. But the funnier thing
is nothing better. If I'm the Rangers, I'm like, all right, man, that guy. If you can get under Marchand's skin and have him mention you in a press conference, like for him to mention you at all, that's something. I mean, that's
a big deal.
That's pretty good.
But now, in a strange twist of fate, both Adam and I ran into Rick Nash, who was at the arena at the Columbus game yesterday. So we talked about the trade, and then like an hour later, we actually ran into Rick Nash.
The funny thing to me about the Kreider thing is, obviously what he brings is a really powerful presence, like a guy who's been good in the playoffs, a guy, the perfect type of player, like a perfect rental in a lot of ways. Like he is the epitome of rental. And if you can get him long-term, like you said, Boston, but
yeah.
The most interesting thing I think that's happened the last couple of days was Toronto jumping in last minute and getting Blake Coleman, because when they did that, Tampa jumping in and getting Blake Coleman. When Tampa gets Blake Coleman, that sends a message to Boston, Washington, St. Louis, and these teams that are at the top of the level, because like suddenly now Tampa, who's already probably the best team in the NHL, just got better, right? And so now what do you have to do? Like, so what happens? We see Washington, and they get Brendan Dillon. Like we see them, come out of nowhere, and suddenly now Washington steps up and pays a lot. We talk about Dillon's worth a lot, whatever they pay a lot for him, but he's worth it probably if they get far in the playoffs, he's worth it. And now I think Boston suddenly, because Boston is even more directly affected by what Tampa does in a lot of ways. I think Boston sits back and they really have to go hard for Kreider. I think it becomes like a situation where this whole the domino effect that's going on here.
It's an arms
definitely
race.
puts.
It's an arms.
It definitely becomes an arms race at the very top.
Yeah, and apparently,
I'm going to dispute a little bit that Kreider's been a good playoff guy. I think he's been just sort of an average to below average playoff guy. You look at his
good series and bad series. I'll say that
he's been inconsistent, I guess. In the
playoffs.
I think that's fair. He was effective as a goaltender injurer.
Yeah.
But
well, that's of course the most famous thing he did in the playoffs, which really definitely,
or
infamous, I guess you should say.
Point out though that there's a report going around that Pavel Buchnevich was upset that he is on the TSN trade board and he could get traded. I agree with that. And Kreider told him to
shut up. Frank Saravelli in a head-to-head death match. All right, so we need Frank Saravelli who makes the trade board.
But then apparently Kreider,
let's go.
But then apparently Kreider may have told him to shut up in Russian, and that may be even funnier. But it does show like the kind of gravitas Kreider has in that room right now. So if the Rangers lose him, it's a big loss not only on the ice but in the room. But the Rangers probably will also trade Jesper Fast. If they get into the trading mode, there's at least 3 or 4 guys that'll go. The Kreider one, that's the one where you have to almost think. We thought it would go down to like the last 2 days, but now it seems like they may start to put it in motion earlier, just so they make sure they get the most value.
Well, I mean, go ahead, Dak.
I talked to along those lines. I talked to a really good source this morning about Sammy Vatanen, because I've been like, I've heard different things going back and forth, and I finally got to the perfect one to get to on Sammy Vatanen, and find out what's the deal? Is he hurt? He hurt so much the teams aren't calling anymore. Do you want to do they want to resign them? We've heard that. We've heard all these different conflicting things between Josh and Tom Fitzgerald and all. And basically, this is the skinny on Vatanen as of this morning. Vatanen could be playing right now. Essentially, he's healthy enough to play. He would be, it would be a matter of playing with how much pain can you play in, which is a lot of players right now are playing with a lot of pain. But there's no point. They're not holding him out specifically. But if I get the feeling if he was healthy, they would be holding him out specifically. But he's just, they're not going to play him in pain. There's no point in that. Teams around the NHL now know that, I think, as of today, and I think you're going to see and I think they've definitely set their mind on trading him. So I think you're going to see a very interesting thing with Vatanen over the next couple days, especially given what we've seen, with the trade market. And Vatanen's better than all those guys, right? So
true.
He's probably better than. I mean, I would say he's the best of any of the defensemen available.
He's the best rental left.
He is. He's the best rental defenseman left.
Better than and he's obviously better than Martinez or Scandella.
Now, I did see a report, one that I forgot to mention about Kreider from the fourth period, and it basically saying that the Islanders have interest. I'm going to tell you there's probably a 0% chance the Rangers will trade Kreider.
Why would the Rangers trade him to the Islanders?
They can have all the interest in the world. They will never trade him to the
There's
Islanders.
about as much chance of the Islanders and Rangers making a deal as there is with the Sabres and the Leafs. It will not happen.
No.
Unless that really makes no sense, because it's too easy for Kreider to re-sign on the island, and just live where he lives. So that doesn't make any sense to trade him to the island. Because he probably would be possibility could resign back in New York, but there's no if you're trading the Islanders, you're probably trading a re-signed Chris Kreider. You're probably trading a guy who's going to stay there.
This is where I'm sorry, Kev, let me just go say it. This is where the rental market is right now. I mean, Vatanen is on the IR right now, but like as you said, he's probably going to come back fairly soon. It's not a serious injury. But after him, the number 2 rental on the market could be Ron Hainsey. And that's, because Dylan's already been moved and Scandella's already been moved. So, I mean, I don't know if that means that you're going to see more hockey deals, because Martinez, when that happens, that's a hockey deal. He's got another year left at $4.1 million. So it's not a rental situation. And that's why Vegas probably is paying a couple second rounds. But there are not many rental defensemen out there. Gustafson from Chicago is another one, but I don't know whether they want to trade him or not. And he's got some defensive issues. So, but there's not. And somebody in the chat saying Mike Green, Daly. They're those guys are. They're on the.
Green will get dealt, but Green I expect to be like one of the last guys to get dealt.
Green will get dealt.
I think he'll get dealt, but I think it'll be one of those things where everybody exhausts the defensive market, and then someone will get Mike Green in hopes that he can play some games.
Right. That's what I'm hearing in Detroit here, is that Green is going to end up going, but it won't be for much. And he's got a plan B. He hasn't played very well hasn't played well at all this season, and he didn't play well after he came back last year. He just had tough go, and when he first got to Detroit, he actually played great, and they like him here. He was good. He's good with the young players. I'm not sure people would have guessed that about Mike Green, that he'd be a good tutor. He was, and so they liked him a lot, but he just hasn't been sharp. Now, could he pull it together in a short period? I mean, I guess it's possible. But here's what I wanted to throw out here, because I think this is an interesting question. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Colorado gets Kreider. Where does Boston go? Like, where do they go to get their help? Could they end up the big loser in all this when all the
they really could. I mean, the other guys out there, Pajot, is that a fit for Boston? Not really. I mean,
no. Paul Mary, maybe.
Don't they want? They want.
I mean, it's possible
Paul Mary,
if they lose out on Kreider.
I'm not buying Paul Mary. I'm not buying Paul Mary being available. Like, it's just the more people I talk to.
Yeah, I'm not buying that one either. I anything's possible. Obviously, we saw with Andy Green, but I think
Mike Hoffman, maybe. Mike Hoffman, could the Bruins go that way?
Yeah, Hoffman could be one. I'll even say Buchnevich could be one. Like, if they all of a sudden go look around after Kreider and say, well, we still need somebody that has goal scoring ability, they might give the Rangers something for Buchnevich, because he has a high skill level and has scored goals. I think he's got 12, 13, 15, something like in that range. So maybe him.
Kovalchuk. They were interested in him a couple years ago, and he's played well.
Yeah. I don't see them going for him. I don't know why. Who do
you think, Kevin? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that I don't think there's anybody out there like Kreider, and
right.
I think they saw him as a good fit because of his skating, and the fact he's a Massachusetts native. They've always liked having a few guys like that. They brought in Coyle last year, and he was good for them down the stretch. So, I mean, I don't see Buchnevich as a guy they'd want, because he's not proven enough. They want a guy that's going to come in and they know is going to perform.
They may have trouble getting that guy, though, like you said.
That's the issue, I think. So,
Joe Thornton, someone just texted me.
Joe Thornton seems like a possibility. Like, you saw I wrote a column. Like, I thought he would be a great fit for the Penguins. Like,
right, but I can't see Joe Thornton going back to Boston and dealing with all that.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's at the end of his career. It wouldn't be for an extended period. I think anything is possible. I think if you're Joe Thornton, you just kind of look at it and say, who's the chance to win it all?
The funniest thing about that is I heard somebody on XM saying, Joe Thornton would be like the real how'd they put it? Like, sentimental, like, return. I'm like, there's nothing sentimental about Joe Thornton returning to Boston. Like, if you remember how it ended, but I mean, it's possible Boston goes. I mean, I wouldn't use that word.
Returning.
Yeah,
it would be an interest. It would be a great story, of course.
Somebody in the chat threw out the name of Athanasiou. I don't know if that's a fit for Boston, but
yeah, I don't know. I think that kind of trade is going to be hard to make for Detroit, because Detroit's going to want a lot. They're going to want to be paid. He was a 30-goal scorer.
Right.
And even though he hasn't played well this season, in the last week, including last night, he got 2 goals. And all of a sudden, he's starting to be reminded why everybody wants him. He's so dynamic. He gets at least 1 breakaway a game, sometimes 2. And he is fast as all get out. But he's been problematic for the Red Wings in terms of his contract, and he hasn't always gotten along with Jeff Blashill. Right. So I think they'd be willing to trade him, but I think they're going to want a good return.
I'll give you another Boston type player. I think Luke Glendening is a Boston type player, and if they can't get a big time scorer, maybe they do just get another guy who plays hard and can hold the line, like on a third or fourth line.
Well, now here's the thing about Glendening. He only makes $1.4 million.
Right.
He's a leader. Like, you're not trying to shed Glendening's contract, and, having him around, is sort of a good thing for the Red Wings. So again, you're going to have to overpay to get Glendening. Like, they're not just trying to move him out.
Right.
Well, here's the name that popped up on the weekend, Kevin, and we know Florida is looking to upgrade their defense. But clearly, Quenneville is not happy with his blue line right now. But the name of Vincent Trocheck popped up, and is this just a signal of, there have been players who have been good players that were in Chicago that just didn't fit with Quenneville? Is this a situation where Trocheck and what he does and his particular talents don't fit with what Quenneville is looking for?
Well, it has to be, because he played well until this season.
Yeah.
And now
last season was a little off. Last season with his injury, he was a little off.
Yeah, but he was hurt last year. So.
Yeah.
maybe he's just never come back. But this season is really, his numbers are way down.
Yep.
So if they're going to really trade him, and I noticed TSN put him on their board, which means other GMs are talking about his availability. No one has said that to me, but I could see that. But there would be a market for him because he played great for a couple of seasons there.
I'm gonna throw one more name out. What if things get so bad in San Jose that they don't think they could re-sign Kevin Labanc, who signed for a ridiculous sum this season to come back? Like Boston could use a guy like that on the power play. He's a true power play specialist, but also can still score a little bit on 5-on-5, but deadly on the power play.
Yeah, why not? I mean, this is the time where you got to sort of be creative. So,
Well, the name that has been floated in the last week or so, and when Toronto was not going well early in the year, this was also floated, but Tyson Barrie is, now the thing is, and I wrote about this yesterday, if the Leafs are shopping Tyson Barrie, then it's tantamount to them saying we're not making the playoffs. Because with Riley out and they're shorthanded on defense, if they trade the guy who's their point man on the power play and playing 23, 24 minutes a night, then that's Kyle Dubas saying, I'm trying to recoup some of the assets that I traded over the year. I don't think they're going to do that, but
I don't think so either.
It has been out there, and that I think
how can you do that in that marketplace when you're in the playoff run? Like you're in a playoff race in that marketplace. There's just no way you can possibly.
Right. What kind of risk is that? That's what I'm saying.
I think Dubas will hold on to the playoff hopes with like grim death, and he's not trading anybody.
Try to correct it. I think he's going to try to actually go out and
he did make a trade today. We should talk about.
He make a trade today. He picked up. Not Malkin, but Malden.
Yeah, Dennis Malgin.
We get that straight.
This is a deal. This is a deal that even though it's a minor deal, that's a head scratcher because what is the big problem with the Maple Leafs right now? They're small, they're speedy, and they're skilled, and they don't have enough size and sandpaper. All those S's.
Well, the only thing I can do.
And what do? They trade a big, aggressive player in Mason Marchment, who's a borderline NHLer who has had a history of not being able to stay healthy. So those are the negatives on him. Undrafted free agent who they developed through their organization. They trade him for Dennis Malgin, who's 5'9", 170 pounds. Now Russ tells me, and I've seen him play a number of times, that he's a pretty decent defensive forward. And based on how bad the Leafs were defensively last night when they got curb stomped by the Penguins, they need as many good defensive players as they can get. But this is the perception here is the wrong one because everybody knows that if the Leafs are to succeed over the next few years in the postseason, they have to get bigger, they have to get tougher at both ends of the ice, and this is not a deal that's conducive to that. So that's why
I disagree. I think they've strengthened their 5-on-5 defense with this. He plays around 12, 13 minutes. He's better than Gauthier. He's around 40% on faceoffs, more takeaways than giveaways. He does a little bit of everything, but he will not kill you with the bad turnover. And the Leafs have to have more reliable guys playing reliable minutes because their defense is porous. And I think this does help that cause.
And here's the thing about all that. Let me bring this up and then get Kevin's opinion on this. Because here's the thing about this. Malgin, played with Matthews in Zurich, Switzerland when Matthews was over there. You have to think that they went to that they talked to Matthews and they's like, there's a guy that's possibly available. And Matthews must have said nice things about the guy. He must, believe that there's something to his game. And so I think there could be something sneakier here. Like they might have gotten something really good that fits them pretty well. And it doesn't hurt ever to go to your superstar and have your superstar sort of be on the hook for it a little bit. Like if Malgin, he's going to be able to push Malgin and say, listen, man, I got you in here. I'm, and my team listened to me when I said I liked player. All that stuff doesn't hurt you to do that. Not like we're not calling, it's not like Matthews is the GM of the team. But this doesn't hurt. Kevin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm sure they talked to him about what he remembered about the guy, and they're not only they're trying to change kind of an attitude and a culture there. So, and that's not, sometimes bringing in a guy is about what he can mean within the dressing room, and maybe Matthews told him, hey, this guy's defensive minded, he works hard, he'll set a nice tone, people are going to watch him play, and maybe everyone will be a little bit more defensive. And then you bring in him, you bring in another guy, you bring in a third guy, and suddenly everyone's acting in ways that they didn't, prior to the move. So I don't think Dubas is done. I still think he's going to get a defenseman. I don't know who it is.
Andreas Johansson, without Andreas Johnson,
Janssen.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Why do I do that? Kelly Johansson. All these people are going through my head. All these Johnsons and Janssen.
But you doesn't have to call me Johnson. Yeah.
Ryan Johnson. Ryan Joe. Anyway, all right. Let's just go on with this. Let's say with this guy hurt out for 6 months for this opens up. I think Vatanen. I think the possibilities for them going hard.
The 6 month diagnosis really didn't change anything because Janssen was going to be out for the rest of the regular season anyway. This is signifying that this is probably an ACL injury, right, and he's going to be out until probably training camp next year. The situation, and you may very well be right in terms of Matthews and his connection with Malgin going back to Switzerland, but from what I heard, it's more possibly that he's a center and they may, if they're going to trade for a defenseman, maybe looking to move somebody who plays center for them, like an Alex Kerfoot, in a deal to get a blue liner. So they wanted to make sure that they had some center depth past a 36-year-old Jason Spezza and a borderline NHLer in Freddie Gauthier. But I mean, looking at the Leafs right now, I agree with Kevin. I think they need to add a defenseman, but it's a question of, is there a defenseman you can get out there that makes any difference to what is going on with the Leafs right now, which is if they make the playoffs, they're more than likely going to get bashed over the head by Tampa Bay or Boston. Or if they finish in a wild card, playing Washington and Pittsburgh, and all those teams right now simply outclass them. Now that could change.
They're not going to think that way, Mike.
I know they're not going to think that way, but I have to look at it as an observer. I have to look at it and say that. I mean, that's something that their management has to be realistic with themselves and say.
What are your options? What do you just punt? I mean, you can't.
No, they can't do that.
But I'm saying, what are you going to do? You've already traded your first and third in 2020. You've traded your second round pick in 2021. Are you going to trade more draft picks for more quick fixes that may not make any difference anyway?
I mean, Mike, you would have told Rudy he couldn't play football. Like you would have.
That's a great line, and I agree. Mike would have told Rudy. Mike would have never given Rudy the jersey.
Right.
But Mike, here's what I would say about that. If they could get a Vatanen and plug him in for 20 minutes, then they go from, and we talked about this last year when you insisted that they had zero chance to beat the Bruins. And I said, well, that's just not true. If they played the 10 series, the Maple Leafs might have won 3 of them. Now, right, if they could get a guy who could plug in for 20 or more minutes and commit to playing a safe defensive style, maybe that moves that needle up to 4 out of 10 against that. Because their offense is so dynamic.
Yeah.
If they got hot for one series, of course they have a chance to beat the Bruins. Now, are the Bruins better? Yes. Yeah. Top to bottom. But so I'd say you go for it. You got a great offense.
They're going to beat the Bruins.
I think there's a better chance of them going out and reacquiring Ron Hainsey from Ottawa than there is to them trading for Vatanen, because Vatanen is going to go for what in the same neighborhood as what Dylan and what Scandell. Yeah. It's going to be a 2 and something, and Fitzgerald. Well, they're definitely not trading a 1. They're definitely not trading a 1.
Because I don't think Vatanen.
I don't know why you wouldn't.
Yeah,
I don't think he's getting a
first
round.
No, and I accept that point. I'm not sure Vatanen is the guy they're going after, but I do think they're going to get a defenseman.
Well, the
guy that'll play, defense.
And just to further that possibility, there were 3 Toronto, and you can misinterpret scouts being at games, especially now late in the process. But when there are 3 Toronto scouts at an Ottawa-Buffalo game last night when the Leafs had just played Ottawa on Saturday and played Buffalo on Sunday. That's conspicuous. So if you look at both of those teams, Hainsey is one guy, and Colin Miller, who the Leafs really liked a couple times when he was in Boston and when he was in Vegas, who Buffalo is looking to get rid of. because he's got another 2 years on his contract. That might be somebody that Dubas goes after because it would address their defense going forward, right-hand shot, and I don't think they would have to give up a ton to get him. So if they make a deal for a defenseman, I maybe a Kyle Miller, maybe a Brandon Montour from the Sabres, or Hainsey.
I do want to mention what was going on in Philly yesterday because it's kind of interesting. So you have Nolan Patrick, who they feel like is close to maybe going to Lehigh, but he has to first be able to practice with contact, which he hasn't done. So time is running thin on that to decide whether they keep him on LTIR or actually activate him. And Shane Gostisbehere is the opposite, who's activated but didn't play yesterday, won't play next game. Maybe he'll play Saturday because he had a shot in his knee. If he doesn't play soon, he won't be able to be traded either. So the Flyers may be stuck with like just a last-minute, really cheap rental, and that's it. And I know that's going to leave some fans empty, but that's what it seems like. On the plus side, last night Claude Giroux made a pass from his knees that helped get him an assist, and he is now the all-time assist leader for the Flyers, passing Clark. And that was nice. It was nice to see.
Isn't that power play?
Yeah, it's power play. Yep, he's the all-time.
It was so perfect he did it from his knees because that was like a Clark thing, you know. Like Clark did it from Clark had so many goals he scored or passes he made from his knees. It was kind of insane. It was really. Can we discuss the Jeff Carter to Philadelphia stuff for a second?
Yeah, I don't know what started that on Twitter, but I
oh
can
my gosh,
0% chance, 0.
It was funny because I wrote, you know, I just don't see the Flyers getting Jeff Carter. I wrote back to our buddy Giskello. He's a really nice guy.
Doesn't he have a
I
note?
wrote back to him, I'm like, Jeff Carter is lazy. He doesn't want to come back. He doesn't want to leave Southern California. And then someone wrote, like, put a picture of me and put a picture of Jeff Carter and said, of me, like, this is the guy who's calling this guy lazy. Like, and I'm not saying that I'm not lazy. I'm just saying that Jeff Carter is definitely lazy.
Doesn't he have a no trade clause that blocks trades to Dry Island?
He definitely has a list of teams that he doesn't want to be traded to. I think he has one of those deals. I would probably say Philly is one of them. We know Columbus.
It would be so insulting to the spirit of Ed Snyder if they did that. If they the way that, anyway, I just cannot see it. I cannot see the way that ended. I cannot see. I don't see him wanting to come here. I don't see the Flyers wanting to get him. I'm sorry. I don't know where that rumor came from. Can we go to Colorado for a second because we're running out of time here. I want to get to Colorado because I want to talk about the goaltending situation out there, which is getting like worse by the day. Because yesterday, more news comes out that Grubauer is going to be hurt for a while.
Yeah.
And now we really are in a spot where, you know, I've been writing about that. I've heard, you know, the Craig Anderson talk. I've heard Brian Miller talk. What do you think, Kevin? What do you think's going on with that?
Well, I mean, I think they're looking at goalies, but, you know, unless you're going to convince someone to give you Lundqvist, I don't know that, you know, they just got to pick one, I guess is what it comes down to.
There's a lot to pick from.
Yeah, they did get good news and bad news. The injury to Rantanen was not as serious as first indicated, so they'll probably get him back before the end of the regular season.
Put him in goal. Is that what you're saying? They'll put him in that?
What's that?
They're going to put Rantanen in that? Is that what you think? I'm saying you guys never give goalies credit.
They've got
go get anybody.
No,
yeah.
Kevin, I mean, don't you need to get a playoff guy, a guy with some experience or something?
But yeah, I guess so. But I mean, a lot depends on, you know, what they're going to want for these. Like, I don't think it'll be as much that they'll have to give up to get a guy like either Anderson, Bernier, or Ryan Miller. So
I think Anderson costs maybe a third round pick.
Yeah, it's not a terrible spot to be in. There's a lot to choose from.
There is a lot to choose from, but I think you're flipping a coin.
Oh, like, you're always.
Because right now you have no idea, like, who would be better for you.
Well, I'll give you a good example as to where you're right with flipping the coin. When the Flyers picked up Mrazek, he was awful. He was awful for the minute go. He was never going to work out there. Right. And in Carolina, he's working out again. So, like, you don't know.
Well, this is the thing I think it has to be a factor if you're Joe Sakic. Two of the goaltenders who are on the market, probably Corey Crawford and Jimmy Howard have had injury issues. Crawford throughout his career, or at least more recently in the last few years, Howard this year. Ryan Miller is healthy, but he's been the backup to Gibson the last couple of years, and I think he's played 14 or 15 games. So being able to throw him in as a spot starter and playing, everything except back-to-back, I don't know if that does Miller any favors, and whether he can really do that at age 39. That's why I think Anderson's the best option, because Anderson has been a consistent starter for Ottawa. He's been like a 1A, 1B with Nielsen. He's played really well. I've seen him play 3 times in the last couple of weeks. He stoned the Leafs on Saturday night when he came in relief. He played really great against Buffalo. Yeah. He's a good goaltender. He got them to within a goal of the Stanley Cup final a few years ago. I think Anderson is the guy you go after.
I don't disagree with that, but I think it's got to be it's got to be Miller or Anderson, because to me, you have to go with the guy who's been in the playoffs before, and you want to go with the guy who's hungry to win a Stanley Cup. Like they're at the end of their careers, and neither of those guys are going to win a Stanley Cup if they stay where they are.
Right.
So Miller and Anderson have one shot, and they could go to Colorado, and they could actually win a Stanley Cup. They could actually take that team and win the Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I'm buying what you're selling. I mean, there's some logic to it. I mean, you got to sit around and either go with the gut feeling about, I don't even think they'd even consider Howard or Crawford. I just don't.
You're not gonna get a guy who's hurt again. Your problem is you got. Yeah.
The only other guy I would throw out there would be Bernier, who has played well for the Red Wings this season. Has played well recently. Looks pretty sharp. But Anderson makes some sense. But if they're not going to get Grubauer back, I'm not sure they can win anyway with Anderson or anybody else.
The interesting.
See, the thing with Anderson and Miller, and I apologize for interrupting, Mike, but the thing with Anderson and Miller to me are both of these guys at one point in their careers, Anderson recently, Miller way a long time ago, were in a game 7 of a conference final. Like they were there. They were at that point where they could have gone to the Stanley Cup Finals with one more win. And that, to me, if you get that close and you're not hungry, I mean, to me, both of those guys come in with such an attitude.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I get what you're selling. I kind of put it on the line like it's Randall Cunningham with the Vikings. You get a guy like that, they will make some sort of run, but most likely the wheels come off. And then if you gave up too much to do that, you're going to kick yourself.
But it's not going to be much to get, and we talked about it.
No,
it's not going to be much to get either.
It won't be. I mean, anything is possible. I'm just saying, I think the goalies that win in the playoffs are guys that either don't know any better. They're young. They don't know what they don't know.
Right.
Or they're old guys or veteran guys who know, expect to be successful. They expect to be in this position. It's just one or the other. And I don't see Anderson fitting into that. Like, it almost feels like, in his mind, don't you think his time has passed, even in his own mind, that, I don't know. I mean,
you watch him play, like the way his energy level is crazy. Like,
if it is, Kev, I mean, his skills have not deteriorated because like I said, I mean,
no, he's played well.
He's played really well, and I think he's a prideful veteran who I think even with a team like Ottawa, who we know the situation that's going on in Ottawa right now.
And they might bring him back for another year. They
might.
Exactly.
Yeah. I can't argue with your logic. It's almost just a feeling I have that he's not going to be able to do it. Everything you're saying is right. He's always worked hard. He's always been. He's actually known for his consistency. Yeah. Throughout his career.
Classic.
And I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're Colorado, you're one of the best teams in the Western Conference right now, and you have it. If you can get one of those goalies hot, and ride it a little, all you need is a little bit hot. You have enough scoring on that team. You don't need like a guy to carry you. You just need a goalie who can actually not ruin it for you. And the problem right now is that.
And the advantage that Sakic has right now is he's got the cap space to do both things. He can go out and if he thinks he needs to get a substitute for Rantanen, and nobody's going to be as good as Rantanen, they can go out and do that, and they can go out and get the goaltender. What I'm interested in, Ak, is our little pitted battle between the two of us about the Edmonton Oilers. The situation with them, with now Neal out, with McDavid out, with Clefbaum out, with Cassian on the injury, the suspension. None of these players can be placed on long-term injury. All the money counts against the cap, and they don't have the room to be able to go out and get players. So they may have to stand pat with what they have. And honestly, I don't know if that's going to be good.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I really expected them to do something, but they've actually been hamstrung by the injuries because they can't do enough to overcome all these injuries.
Yeah, they're still winning. I mean, we'll see what happens tonight. Now they have another guy, Clefbaum's out now. I mean, tonight they play, I think, Boston or something. They play a really good team.
Just keep winning, Eck. Don't worry.
Yeah, just to piss me
off.
I
don't see them being Boston without Clefbaum.
What do you mean you don't see them being Boston? Come on.
Anything's possible, right? Quickly, because we're not going to have Kevin again before this happens, and this Saturday is the 40th anniversary of the Miracle on Ice, right? And really interesting debate today on XM, and I really love, I like the NHL Network channel. They've always been good to me. They're good to press us on there all the time.
I'll be on today. 35.
You're right. Yeah. So they call it the world according to Russ, I think. Don't they?
They do anyway. That. Yes.
Anyway, so and Kevin's on all the time too. So
gee, I feel inadequate somehow.
Yeah, you're the only one. They don't want. All right. So the reality is they had an interesting debate today. The Mikey Ruzioni goal versus the Paul Henderson goal, and what is the more important goal in hockey history? Now, for those of you who don't know, Mike Ruzioni obviously is the guy he's the guy who scored the goal, to help the Team USA beat the Russians in the Miracle on Ice. Paul Henderson's the guy who scored the goal in the Canada-Russia series.
Okay.
And both are like equally just their epitome goals for their countries, right?
I know I'm biased because I'm American, but I have to say this. Canada was expected to beat Russia, got surprised by how good the Russians were, and won Game 7 and Game 8 to beat the Russians. Nobody expected Team USA to beat the Russians. No one. So if by that logic, I would say that the Ruzioni goal is probably more important.
I mean, I'm going to go a Ruzioni goal because it started a movement in this country,
right?
And it really helped get USA hockey rolling again. And
it's hard to compete against that, obviously.
What did they win in 1960? And then all of a sudden it disappeared for a while. You had the Mullins, but you didn't have a lot. That was a big deal. That was a big deal.
Yeah. Plus, nobody outside of Canada and Russia knew what was going on in the Summit Series unless you lived in a border town in North Dakota or in Detroit or in Buffalo.
Right.
The Summit Series was huge to me. Because I could watch it, in my home in Wayne, Michigan. But nobody else knew what was going on. The whole world knew about Mike Ruzioni's goal. Like, that was a huge Olympic event. And the fact that that it's been set up as the greatest upset in sports history, all of that. I mean, that's just the biggest hockey goal ever. I mean, there are people who can't name one NHL team that know the story of Ruzioni's goal.
Right. Miracle on Ice is the term that everybody in.
I mean, Al Michaels said recently when he was calling the game, he didn't think the U.S. would win.
Well, what I don't understand, and I think it was Eklund and I just had this conversation, and I have written about this. I've actually asked USA Hockey to do something about it.
Yeah.
I've actually asked the people at the Lake Placid Ice Arena to address this. Why they don't designate on that Lake Placid ice in permanent display where Ruzioni was when he scored that goal is beyond me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't understand with all the kids that come through there and play on that ice, why that isn't permanently on the ice.
Right.
I just don't get it. And I don't understand that when I bring it up to people, they look at it like
I mean,
you're absolutely right. My friend Eric's kid has played on that ice in that tournament.
Many people do still today. So.
Well, I can make an historical equivalent here. When the Yankees knocked down old Yankee Stadium and built the new stadium, they left the grounds where the old stadium was, and they provided a sort of a map of where home plate was and where right field was. And to go
Right.
there and stand where Mickey Mantle or Babe Ruth stood, you could feel the energy. And all I know is, like, if I ever go to Lake Placid, I want to stand on the spot where Michael Ruzioni scored that goal. So they should mark that as a special place.
Yeah, I don't understand. I'm gonna actually get a petition. That's my next move.
Okay, I'll sign.
I'm game. Let's put it on HockeyBuzz. I mean, absolutely. I mean, when I think about it, it's just the couple of things I was talking to my son about this game, and I usually just ask me questions about it. Because we watched the movie the other day, and I said, it was on in the afternoon. We couldn't. The only way I could get it, find out the score, because I wasn't. You guys were, Mike and Kevin were on Border Towns. You could watch it. But we couldn't
in Arizona, by the way. But
you were in Arizona. That's right. You were in Arizona.
I watched the game live on CTV. It was on Don. Don Chevrier was doing the play-by-play, and I watched the game live, which was probably one of the few people in the U.S. who did.
But isn't it fascinating that ABC didn't move that game to the night? Like it was the Olympic thing.
They wanted to. I think Russia didn't want. No, that is true. Yeah, that's what happened. Russia didn't want it moved because of when it would have been in Russia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they wanted to move it.
I did think about that. I was like, I couldn't imagine that they hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, no, they did. I remember it's actually in. I just did Mike Emmerich's book with him, and Mike's friends with the guy who had the only live American broadcast. He was a local radio.
Uh-oh.
Wow.
It'll come back.
And that they actually wanted to move that game, but the Russians didn't want to move because it would take it in the middle of the night.
All right.
I mean, I will say this. I'll ask the panel the question. If Treychak stays in the game, do any of us think the U.S. would have won? Because I don't think they would have won.
Yeah, the Russians certainly don't believe the Americans would have won. I've asked that to, Fetisov, and they never understood Fetisov and Larionov. I've talked to it about it, and really Russians in general just didn't understand what was going on. Nobody understands to this day. So
the conspiracy theory of that, of course, is that the Russians had this sense that there's a huge swelling tide and that they were in trouble, and that they would have a built-in excuse by taking Treychak out if they lost. Like that they would be able to say that for years, And
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that is ridiculous. I'm just saying that I've heard people throw that theory out there.
I don't think Viktor Tikhonov was thinking about posterity when he.
No, it's totally absurd. But that's like, why else would they have done? Why did they make that? Like, and no one ever knows quite why they made that move. I mean, because Treychak gave up the goal, right?
How many times have we seen coaches, just exercising their prerogative to be in charge, making moves that we don't understand? And they usually say it's a gut reaction, or, I'm there every day. I can sense when players are going, all that nonsense. And really, it just comes down to them being in a position, I did it because I could.
But I remember Treychak being sort of stunned looking on the bench, like, what just happened?
Yeah. No, it was so cool. Yeah, it was ridiculous. I mean, he was the greatest goalie in the world at that point.
He always said he was the greatest goalie, not in the NHL. Like, everybody would say that.
And just remember, the year before
he lived on that. He loved that.
The year before they beat the NHL All-Stars,
right?
In a 2 out of, I think it was a 2 out of 3, and then the following year they destroyed them. Destroyed in the Canada Cup 8-1 in the final game. So we
would always hear these rumors. It was probably from ex-father that Treychak would come into the NHL, but he never did.
Yeah. Well, and before, the week before the Olympics, the Soviets had destroyed the U.S. team in Madison Square Garden, and Jim Carey told me that the exact quote from Herb Brooks was he had made a mistake by playing Craig too much. He said, "You've lost a few miles per hour off your fastball." That was the quote he used, and he said, "I've made a terrible mistake." Yeah. And he was just trying to motivate him, obviously, but that was
right.
I don't think the U.S. would have won the gold medal with Steve Janaszak in goal. That's just going out on a whim. But anyway.
Why you pick on Janaszak, Mike?
Well, Craig was a better goaltender.
I will tell you kind of an interesting story that Dave Olgren, I don't know if all of our listeners would know who he was, but he was the executive hockey of U.S. Executive director of USA Hockey for many years. Great guy. Mm-hmm. And he was the PR person for that 1980 Olympic team.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. He was a young guy. and he got on a plane wearing his USA Hockey jacket. He was with a couple of other players, and when he got in, the pilot says, "We have, a player, and it was Dave Ogren." And one of the other players said to him, because he said there were 3 players, he said, "Just go with it." And he said, so people started asking to sign autographs. And so he figured the only person that people wouldn't know was Januzak. So he signed the autograph as Januzak. So as he says today, there are probably 50 people in this country that think they've got Steve Januzak's autograph that they got right after the Olympic Games on the plane coming home. But it's actually me signing his name.
That is fantastic.
Yeah. So, but he just went with it.
That is fantastic.
The one thing that is forgotten, and things have changed. I've done so many stories about that team and on the anniversaries that a lot of the guys thought I covered that.
Yeah.
Because I did the 10th anniversary, 15th, 20th. Even Herb Brooks would forget now and then that I wasn't there. He would just talk so much about it. But that one of the themes that guys always talked about is they always said, we were a little better than people gave us credit for.
Sure.
And so on I don't know if it was the 30th anniversary or what, I wrote a story about that very thing where I said, hey, look, this team, this was a miracle. There's no doubt about it. But this team was better. And I pointed out that, Morrow, of course, had a long, lengthy career.
Right.
Mike Ramsey.
I think he was saying Dave Perskoff.
Yeah, Mark Johnson.
Suter was a big time player.
So I wrote this story.
I want to get out of here because I know we have to go. It's 2:00. But I wanted to ask you, Kevin, real quick. Are there any news reporters that cover the NHL right now that we would know that you think were at that game covering?
Oh, I know. Helene Elliott was.
Okay.
Yeah, Helene Elliott covered, and also Frank Brown was the Associated Press guy. Now he's retired now, but he was the NHL vice president. Yeah, no, he covered for AP. Helene Elliott covered as well. Wow. Every year she puts on the anniversary her notes and her roster and everything. She puts it on Facebook. So it's been on there this week. She's talked about that. So she for sure was there. And Frank Brown covered for Associated Press.
That's interesting. All right, guys, we got to get going. Do me a favor, guys. Go to patreon.com/hockey. And this is why. We're going to be doing a special show on Friday. We're not going to talk about it. It's going to be, we're going to do 2 shows. We're going to do a regular show on Friday, but we're also going to do another show on Friday. And that other show is going to be posted on Saturday or Sunday. But it's going to, if you want to watch that show recorded live, if you're at patreon.com, even for like $1, whatever, you can throw $1 in there. You can watch it live. We're gonna do that as a way of saying thank you for those who support the show. So it'll be a special link to watch that live on Friday. Besides our other show, it's gonna be a lot of fun. I promise you. There's gonna be a show you absolutely want to watch. I don't want to talk about it beyond that, but it's gonna be something you're gonna really enjoy. So go to patreon.com/hockey. Just become, even just, I don't know, whatever. If you can. Otherwise, it will be posted on Saturday. Probably it'll post on Saturday. But if you want to watch it live, do that. And we'd love to have some of you guys in the chat room live for that show, because it's going to be a lot of fun. Patreon.com/hockey, $5, $1, whatever. It would be wonderful. Thank you so much for your support. With that, we'll say have a great time. Enjoy the games. We'll be back again tomorrow. And remember, without the buzz,